Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the City of Cedar Falls for this September 14th, 2022. Call the meeting to order and a roll call vote by Karen.
Okay. Grubevich? Here. Holst?
Here.
Leeper?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Chrisman?
Here.
Moser?
Here.
Saul? Hartley? And?
Lynch.
Lynch. Sorry, I don't have my papers in front of me. I'm going to go grab those.
All right.
Off the table
Thank you,
over
Karen. We do have a quorum here. I would entertain a motion to approve the August 24th Planning and Zoning Commission minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now's the time for public comments. We have one person in the room who has no comments, so we'll move on to new business. First item is rezoning amendment agreement for Lot 5 and 6 of Midway Business Park.
Okay, this is kind of an interesting case because it's a rezoning, not for a change in the underlying zoning, but because there was an agreement when this was initially done in 1995. They had upzoned the property from R1 to R4 residential, and the neighbors in part of the subdivision were concerned about the intensity of uses. And so the agreement was that they would be able to use it for office uses, which wouldn't have that much of an impact on the neighborhood, because at that point, the first subdivision had this section, cul-de-sac, so traffic would have been going in through the neighborhood. In 1995, they did the second Midway second edition, and for those 4 lots. But after that, they ended up doing a business park subdivision that created 7 lots. And you can see the area on the screen, but some of these lots have been, a couple of them have been built across the line, so there's actually not that many developable lots left. But it created this cul-de-sac. And right now, the bank, First Security Bank has developed Lot 1, and they were the owners of the property. And then the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa built their facilities right there along Green Hill Road. And then Oak District, a couple of years ago, came in with a similar amendment to the zoning agreement to build a residential assisted living facility. So at that time, when they came in to make the amendment for lots 7 and 8, the amendment was to allow the assisted living, which is permitted normally under the R4 district, but in this case, because of the zoning agreement, it didn't allow that. Also in the deed of dedication, when they did the subdivision, it had that wording, and so in 2018, the deed of dedication was updated to take that language out altogether, and then the zoning amendment was just for lots 7 and 8, and this has become a potential, there's a need for it, and so Oak District would like to come back and ask for the same amendment to change, to allow this type of development on lots 5 and 6. The zoning agreement will have to be revised, and it'll come back to you at the next, when we have the public hearing. You have the location map and kind of showing where the location of these 2 lots are. They have submitted a site plan, and the size of the building is essentially the same as on the first development. This one's actually adding a couple more parking spaces. There's not a lot of need for parking because most of the residents don't have cars, but so it's essentially the same, except they are providing a little more parking. The Community Development Services recommends approval of the R4 zoning district amendment to allow a senior assisted living facility on those 2 lots. And we're here to get the comments from the public and from the commission.
All right. Thank you, Tom. I don't see anyone from the applicant here. So anyone from the public that wants to speak to this item? Probably not. Don't see them. So we'll bring it back to the commission. Again, this item is for discussion for a public hearing at our next meeting.
Looks great.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, I think, because it would be would have been that way to begin with, and there's no other development around it other than the other assisted living, so, I mean, there's no neighbors to offend or anything, so I think it should be, in my eyes, a slam dunk, but
I assume notices still go out to neighbors, and we're not on this one.
Yes, I did send, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
a courtesy letter to them on a week ago.
Okay.
So the 7th is when it went out.
I move to schedule the hearing for the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Next item of business is a zoning text amendment petition from City Council to amend the parking requirements in the downtown character district. Karen, are you going to kick us off with this one?
Yes. Council, sorry, I'm talking to the microphone here. This is a petition from the City Council to amend the parking requirements in the downtown character district. There were two parts to that. One, to delete all requirements for shared parking, and secondly, to increase the minimum parking requirement for residential and multi-unit and mixed-use buildings from 0.75 spaces per bedroom to 1 space per bedroom. And in the staff report, I kind of went through, this was discussed by the commission back in January, this a similar request, and so kind of the same issues were discussed. And I included the minutes just to refresh your memory in your staff report, to remind you of what the discussion was at the time. There's still been a lot of confusion about the shared parking, and and there was a lot of discussion about location standards and the time of day when it was. And I think the council just felt like it's a lot of confusing, a lot of complicated, and they felt in the end that maybe it's just better to delete the shared parking requirements from the code. It's a fairly minor part of the requirements for parking downtown. And given all the confusion and all the discussion, it was a unanimous vote to recommend this to the commission to consider this. So, and then there was a second motion to add to that first motion to then also consider increasing the minimum parking requirement back to 1 space per bedroom, which is what the requirement was in the previous zoning in the downtown area. So here's a little bit of that timeline of what was done before. You heard this back in January. You recommended to keep the shared parking, but you did increase it from what it was originally proposed in the code that was proposed, adopted last November. So you did recommend increasing that from 0.5 spaces up to 0.75 spaces per bedroom. And then if you may recall, you also included a provision that said, but not less than 1 space per unit. And that was because if you had a building with all, for example, studio apartments or all 1-bedroom apartments, that you wanted to make sure that there was at least 1 parking space per unit. So that was what P&Z proposed as a compromise at that time, and the council then did adopt that in April, the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation there. So that's a little bit of rundown on the background of what's happened in the past. So with that, just open it up for any discussion. This would be something we would have to set a public hearing for as well, because it would be a text amendment.
All right. I assume no public comments. Bring it back to the commission.
Have there been issues that caused them to reevaluate what the parking situation is now in the zone? Or in the amendment?
I am not aware of any particular issues. I think there was just concerns expressed. And of course, you're free to listen to the council discussion at the committee, that those discussions will be recorded. I hate to put words in their mouth.
Well, I just meant, have you had any issues on your end? Have people?
Well, we haven't
complained
had,
of their,
the code hasn't really been tested that well yet because there hasn't been any new big developments downtown, so we really haven't had to implement the shared parking requirements so far.
But just a reminder to everyone, maybe we have some new members, but we had this exact conversation in January.
Right.
So we've already looked at it, but it's coming back still.
So is the council then, because I read this, I'm like, okay, so what are we doing? Because we kind of already had that recommendation. It's like, because my feeling is like, well, they don't like the idea of the shared parking, which I understand, people could have concerns about the actual implementation of the shared parking and whatever. I guess if we don't try it, we won't find out. But at the same time, I can understand how that could be. But so we were kind of saying, well, let's just go backwards, get rid of the shared parking and kind of end up at the same parking number we had before, right? Isn't that kind of what we did? That's the discussion as I read through it, kind of where we were heading. But they're actually looking then for us to make a recommendation rather than, because we had that, I'm not sure, I'm just understanding procedurally what we're trying to do different than what we did back at the beginning of the year, like Brad
I
said.
think we're being asked if we're sure about it.
Okay.
Well, to clarify that, are we being asked to revise our recommendation to basically grease a change through council? Or does council have a mechanism to make the change on their own without our approval? How does that work procedurally?
The recommendation that you made to them back in February was adopted.
Right.
So it's already in the code. The current parking requirements downtown are 0.75 spaces per bedroom, but not less than one per unit, and the shared parking is still in effect. So that is what you recommended
Okay.
the last time.
Okay,
This
so-
is a new
So then what they're just
petition.
looking for is talking about eliminating the shared parking piece and making that, and just taking the 0.25, adding it to our 0.75 and calling it 1.
Right.
Is that kind
Yes.
of where I'm getting to?
Well, I
Yes.
guess my question was
Okay.
if the role of council in that idea is any different based on our opinion of it and rediscussing the matter. Does council have the ability to go ahead and make that change if they want to? Why is it back to us? We made our recommendation, I guess. Or what is the need for us to reconsider the recommendation?
I think by state law, you're required, if there's any amendment to the zoning ordinance, this would be a new request, considered a
Okay.
new request. If you feel like there's been no change and you have no change in feelings about this, or if there hasn't been any other concerns about it, I guess you should take council's request at face value and say they would like you to reconsider. Because they've had more conversation about the shared parking. I think the latest conversation was about the distance and where shared parking could be located and the time of day it could be located. And those conversations got rather complicated, and then in the end, there was a council member that said, maybe this is just too confusing and complicated. I make a motion to eliminate the shared parking so that there's not this confusion. But the council did, and I encourage you to, between this meeting and the next, to listen to the conversation, because once again, I hate to paraphrase what council has said, but there was some discussion about people are still free to share their parking voluntarily. But I think then the sentiment was, this is getting to be a long conversation, maybe we should eliminate the shared parking from the code.
Well, and that was a point of contention way back when we had our discussions about it. And if there is a gray area or a point of contention that I respect and appreciate because of the cut and dry facts, it's definitely the shared parking thing. The parking minimum requirement, I think we went through that thoroughly enough, and I'm of the opinion that that what we had before with the .5 stall requirement was adequate, and that the compromise position that we took was more than adequate. But the thing I would be willing to revisit is the shared parking requirement. But just to clarify, the shared parking requirement or the parking minimum only applies to new construction, correct? Does a shared parking requirement grandfather into existing projects?
No, it's all for new development it would apply to, and the shared parking requirements are for new residential.
Right.
In mixed use and multi-unit buildings, and for upper floor, a small amount for upper floor, new office space.
I think she's agreeing with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You
That's
know,
what I thought.
I don't have strong feelings, I guess, either way. I mean, I like the idea of the shared parking as a concept. I can also understand people's concerns maybe about implementing it as well. So, and I guess the other thing, as I'm just trying to think through this, is like, I'm not sure how big of an issue it really is, because how many big projects can we stuff in what's left of downtown that's going to cause, I mean, if you put a new 30-unit apartment building in there, you're talking about shared parking of, 20, the shared parking you're talking is probably like 8 stalls or something like that. So,
And that was the point of my question earlier, was we haven't had any issues. We haven't even been able to let this code
Yeah.
live its life like we intended it. And I think we should just keep it as is, and if issues come up later, we can revisit and have a different conversation.
I agree with that.
I agree. I've said it once, and I'm happy to say it again. This is just sad. Let's move forward. Like, how many times do we have to go over this? If there is confusion, then fine, but I don't think that there is confusion. I think this is stalling, and I would like to see this code move forward. The rest of the city is waiting.
Any other feedback? All right, with that, we'll entertain a motion to set the public hearing for the 29th.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
All right. With that, we'll go to any commission updates. Karen?
I don't have anything else. Just to clarify, the last motion was for Tom was
I
saying,
think you said the 29th, but the meeting would be the 28th.
28th.
Today's the 14th.
Pardon,
yeah.
Wanted to
28th.
Wanted to get on the record, it's the 28th.
Appreciate checking me. Thank you.
Do we need to do it again?
I think we're fine.
Okay.
Any commission updates?
I don't have anything for you tonight.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, have a good evening.